Hey guys, and welcome back to another lesson on factorizing quadratics. My name is Miss Danielson, and today we're looking at splitting the middle term. I hope you joined us for our previous lessons, our introduction to quadratics, factorizing three-term quadratics, and factorizing two-term quadratics, because those are the starting points. I'm going to link those down in the description box for you down below, so you can check those out if you need to before you get started here. Otherwise, let's get going. Remember, this is the format of our quadratic where we have three terms, ax squared plus bx plus c. So when I talk about a not being equal to 1, I mean that there's a number in front of the x squared term that's not a 1. Okay, so when x squared has a coefficient, first of all, a coefficient is the number that gets multiplied by the variables in each term. So here a is the coefficient of the x squared term, b is the coefficient of the x term, and c is just a coefficient which has no variable at all. We could just say that that's a value. Okay, up until now, we have mostly been assuming that a is equal to 1. So we're just basically, when there's no number in front of the x squared, it's just 1x squared. And that's been made easier for us when we're factorizing because we just started by setting up our two sets of brackets and we automatically put x in one bracket and x in the other bracket because we know that x times x makes x squared. But now that we've got a number in front of the x squared, we can't do that anymore because x times x will just be x squared, and where would our number come from? So things are going to get a bit more difficult. If there is a number or coefficient other than 1 in front of the x squared term, our first step to factorizing the quadratic is not just automatically setting up two brackets with an x in each one. In the best case scenario, we always look and really hope that we can find a common factor to factor out. That's going to make things easier for us. So let's have a look at an example, which is in the best case scenario. Right, so we're going to look for a common factor here. I see that this is a quadratic. It's got an x squared term. That tells me it's a quadratic. It's got an x term and it has a number term. The number in front of the x squared term is going to start to make you nervous when you realize the work that goes into factorizing these. But this is one of the best case scenarios where that number in front of the x squared is a common factor for all three terms. That means that all three terms can be divided by the coefficient of the x squared term. This can be divided by 2, this can be divided by 2, and this can be divided by 2. So if a is a common factor for all terms in the quadratic, we factor it out and see the quadratic that we have left is one for which x squared no longer has a coefficient. So if I factor out that 2, I'm left with this quadratic inside the brackets. Let me just explain my quadratic here. This is year 10 work though, looking at an expression and saying they have a common factor and factoring out that common factor. Right, but 2 times x squared, that's how I got that. That makes it 2x squared. 2 times the 3x multiplies to make 6x. And 2 times the 2 multiplies to make 4. So you can see that this is equivalent to what's above. And by factoring out the 2, I now have a quadratic left over where there's no value in front of the x squared. So we're assuming that to factorize this, I can just set up two brackets, x in each bracket, and figure out what the numbers are. So this is why it's called the best case scenario, because now we just factorize like normal. So I've got my 2 out front because I know it's 2 times whatever this is. And this, to be factorized, is a bracket with an x in it and another bracket with an x in it, and then trying to figure out those two numbers. Remember the rule? They need to multiply to make the last term and add to make the middle term. What numbers multiply to make 2? There aren't very many numbers that multiply to make 2. 1 and 2, they're the only factors. So 1 and 2 multiplies to make 2, 1 and 2 add to make 3. 1 and 2 are my values. Okay, it could be x plus 2 or x plus 1 or x plus 1 and then x plus 2. The order doesn't matter. Right, so that's fully factorized now, and that was the easiest case. When there's a number in front of x squared, always see if you can factor it out. Now, if we are not so lucky to have a common factor, we're going to need to split the middle term. Now, this is a process that you're going to have to get used to. It's a bit longer than what we've been doing before, so make sure you pay attention, you copy these steps down, and you know to follow them next time this comes up. Okay, so here is a quadratic. I know it's a quadratic because it's got an x squared term in it. It's got an x squared term, it's got an x term, and it's got a number term. It's a difficult one because there's a number in front of the x squared, so I won't just set up two brackets with x in both brackets. I need to do something more. I first look and I check and I see that 3 is not a common factor. I can't divide everything through here by 3. I could try, but then I'm going to end up with decimals and fractions, and I don't want that. That's not going to make my life any easier. So I leave the 3 there, and I go on to figure out how to split the middle term. The middle term being the b term, or in this case, the 8. That's why this is all in blue, so that we can follow along. Okay, so step 1, multiply a and c together. Note the color scheme I've got up here, A and C, that's the first and the last term. So here I'm going to multiply 3 and 4 together. That's 12. Step 2, find two numbers which multiply to make this product, but add to give B. So what we just done above, A times C gives me a number. Now I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to give that number and add to give B, which is the middle term, right? I know that 3 times 4 multiply to make 12, but 3 plus 4 makes 7, not 8. What other factors of 12 are there? There's 1 and 12. That won't make 8. There's 2 and 6. That's it. That's my pair, 2 and 6. Okay, so 6 plus 2 makes 8, and 6 times 2 makes the 12. So next step, split the middle term into two terms with these two numbers as the coefficient. So I found my two numbers. I'm not going to put those numbers in the brackets now, though. I'm going to split the 8x into 6x and 2x. Okay, this is the exact same quadratic as you've got above. I've got the 3x squared, and I've got the 4 at the end, and in the middle, I've taken the 8x and I split it into 6x and 2x. Now, this may not make any sense to you right now, but it's about to. On to step 4. Step 4, we are going to factorize by parts. You should notice that there's no common factor for all 4 terms, but if we group them, so I look at the first 2 terms, I can see that they have a common factor. I'm going to factor that out. And I look at the last 2 terms, I see that they've got a common factor, and I'll factor that out of them. So that's my next step. My common factor for the first 2 terms was 3, but not just the 3, 3x. If I divide 3x squared by 3x, I'm left with x. Or thinking the other way around, 3x times x makes 3x squared. If I divide 6x by 3x, I'm just left with 2. Right? I've divided the 6 by the 3, that gives me the 2. I divided the x by the x, and it leaves me with 1, or simply no x. Multiplying that through, you can see that 3x times 2 would make that 6x. Next, I looked at the next 2 terms, and I see that they've got a common factor of just 2. Not 2x, because the 4 doesn't have any x in it, just 2. So I factored out the 2. Now, really important, which is why I put it here in pink, it's positive 2, and I don't want to forget to put a sign here. I must put that plus there. So I factored out the 2, and that's why 2x divided by 2 leaves me with x inside the brackets, and 4 divided by 2 leaves me with 2 inside the brackets. I can try just multiplying them out to make sure that that does work. 2 times x is 2x, and 2 times 2 makes 4. Okay, so that is factorized by parts. That is not fully factorized. My answer is not just something times something. It's something times something plus something times something. So my next step is that I need to regroup this. First, notice that the brackets must match. If the brackets don't match, so I'd have different numbers in here, or if the signs don't match, so one's plus, one's minus, then I've made a mistake. But my brackets match exactly, both x plus 2. So that means I can regroup. Basically, what I'm saying when I regroup is that this is 3x times something plus 2 times something. So all together, how many of these brackets do I have? I've got 3x times the bracket, I've got 2 times the bracket. Altogether, I've got 3x plus 2 of these brackets. Okay, so I'm going to regroup that. And what that means is I've just put together the 3x plus the 2 in the one set of bracket, and the repeated brackets that I see here, one of them has not disappeared. I've just grouped them together, so I only need to write it once, because if I were to expand this out, it would be 3x times x and 3x times 2. just like I've got up here, 3x times x and 3x times 2. And then I would go on to this next term and I would do 2 times x and 2 times 2, just like I would have done here. It's just a nice tidy way of grouping it back together so you can see that I'm going to multiply both of these terms by this bracket. Okay, so that is splitting the middle term. That is factorizing when you've got some number in front of the x squared term. Okay, now I know that's quite complicated, so you might need to pause, have a look at these steps here, copy those down, make sure you understand, and let's go on to another example. Okay, once again, there's a number in front of my x squared. I can't factor it out, so I'm going to need to split the middle term. Always, always, always when there's a number in front of the x squared term, at least try, check, make sure that it's not a common factor, and it's not. I can't divide 14 by 3, and I can't divide 8 by 3, so I can't factor the 3 out. So let's go through the steps again as splitting the middle term. First step, multiply a and c. A is the first term, c is the last term, so this is 3 times 8, and 3 times 8 is 24. Right, step 2. I'm finding two numbers now which multiply to make 24, but add to give the middle term, add to give 14. I know 3 times 8 multiply to make 24, but 3 plus 8 makes 11, not 14. So let's think of some other factors of 24. There's 1 times 24, but that's 25 when I add them. There's 2 times 12, that's it. 2 times 12 makes 24, and 2 plus 12 makes 14. So those are my numbers, 12 and 2. So I'm going to split the middle term into the terms with these numbers as the coefficient. So rather than 14x, I'm going to have 12x and 2x. Together that makes 14x. So it's the same quadratic as I've got above. I've just split these apart so that I can do my factorizing by grouping. Next step, factorize by parts. Look at the first two terms and see what the common factor is, and look at the last two terms and see what the common factor is. In the first two terms, I see that I can divide them both by 3, but I could also divide them both by x. So 3x is my common factor. For my last two terms, I can see that I can divide them both by 2. Not 2x, because 8 doesn't have an x, but just by 2. Okay? So there we go. Just double checking what I've got here. I did this divided by 3x. So the 3x is out front. That leaves x on its own. Or if I multiplied that back out, 3x times x would make 3x squared. I did 12x divided by 3x. 12 divided by 3 is 4, and x divided by x gets rid of the x out in here because it's already outside. 3x times 4 makes 12x. Here, my common factor was 2. 2x divided by 2 leaves just the x inside the brackets. 2 times x makes 2x. And 8 divided by 2 leaves me just 4 inside the brackets. 2 times 4 makes the 8. So this would multiply out to be the quadratic I've got above with the split middle term. Next step. Notice that my brackets match. They do match. I've got 4 in both of the brackets. They're both positive 4s. It's exactly the same. Okay, so I can say that I've got 3x times x plus 4, and I've got 2x times x plus 4. So all together, grouping that together, I have 3x plus the 2 multiplied by x plus 4. Again, to explain that, I do 3x times x, 3x times 4. Same thing as I would do down here, 3x times x, 3x times 4. And then I do 2 times x and 2 times 4. Same thing as I would do down here, 2 times x and 2 times 4. So here is my factorized quadratic, and it was a tricky one where I had a number in front of the x squared, and I couldn't factor it out. So that's splitting the middle term. It's probably one of the most difficult ways or difficult types of quadratics that you're going to need to factorize, but you do need to learn these steps. So go back over them if you need to, but if you're ready, here comes an exercise. Before we start, maybe we could have a look over these. It says here that this is when x squared has a coefficient, and it says here in bright blue, split the middle term, if we're not so lucky to have a common factor. So do go over these first and see, is there any of these where I don't need to split the middle term? Because you saw that process, it was a long process. Now I see that there is a number in front of the x squared here. That means that I'm going to have to do something, either factor it out or split the middle term. So check, can you factor it out? If so, great. If not, you're going to have to split the middle term. Looking at b over here, there's no number in front of the x squared. This is not where x squared has a coefficient. I can factorize this the normal way. Okay, so go through and check, do any of these other ones not need to have the middle term split? Are any of these ones different? This one was different, for example. This one over here, I think, might give you difficulty as well. There is a number in front of the x squared term, and I can't divide everything by the square root of 3. I could divide this one by the square root of 3 and this one by the square root of 3, but not the 4. That would look horrible, 4 over the square root of 3. So we're going to have to split the middle term. Let me give you a hint on this one. A times c, square root of 3 times square root of 3 is 3. Okay? Go ahead and give that a try. Hit pause, copy the questions, show you're working, work out your answers, and hit play when you're ready to take them up. I hope you had a chance to hit pause, because here come your answers. There you go. Now, how did you do? I know some of these were a little bit tricky, so please let me know down in the comment section if you're still struggling with them. Otherwise, keep practicing, and I'll see you soon.